Hi, everybody. Welcome to a new edition of Let's Talk About Education with Antonio Corrales. As you may know, I'm an educator, an entrepreneur, and a professor at the University of Houston Clear Lake. My main goal is to introduce you to pioneers in the field of education and to let you know about topics that you may not be aware of, but you may be interested in. Today, we have the honor to have with us Pape, an expert in school finance and somebody who's going to explain us in simple terms what does that mean for all of us. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
It's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun.
All right, Pete, why don't we start by letting you introduce yourself to the audience and kind of letting them know, you know, how do you get to where you are right now in your career?
Okay. Well, I have a bachelor's and master's in accounting.
Okay.
I was hired at a 2A school to be the director of finance back
Okay.
in 2001. I had a great superintendent who quickly took me aside and said, "It's very important that you understand the school funding template." And he took me down to Austin, and at that time he introduced me to to Doctors Ed Flathouse and Tom Canby and all these guys, the gurus at the time, and they fully explained finance to me. And he gave me 2 weeks when we got back and said, "Learn this template. I want you to know where every number comes from." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I did, and it was a 2A school. I got hired in. Our fund balance, our audited fund balance is probably, I think it was about $555,000.
Okay.
It was down to about 220. We had spent 300,000 during the year.
Okay.
So we were really low. We were what was termed circling the drain at the time.
Okay.
And I left there 3.5 years later. We had a fund balance of about $3.5 million. Student academic achievement was still going strong. We worked best team. One of my best teams I ever worked with was a superintendent, myself, and then a director of special programs. And it was us three, and we had great communication. And when a need would come up, a request would come up, we'd all meet and discuss and figure out if it was in the best interest of the district and could we afford it, what could we afford.
Mm-hmm.
And it was some tough decisions and some great discussion, but it worked out real well. And then after that, I was there 3.5 years, and I took a job at Region 12 in Waco.
Okay.
And that was a neat opportunity. I worked a lot with small schools. Actually, I was their business manager quite a bit.
Okay.
We'd go out and run payroll once a month, and we'd go out and do AP check runs twice a month, and I oversaw a group, about 5 or 6 of us that did that. We also did support the accounting software.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a neat opportunity to help schools and help train people and help train new business managers. So I did that almost 2 years, and I really enjoyed it. And then an opportunity came up in Sealy, Texas, to be the director of finance at Sealy.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there, and it was there about 14 months. I learned almost more in that 14 months than any other place.
Okay.
It was a short tenure, but it was a great tenure.
Why do you learn more there than anything?
It was a very unique situation.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably the first time I'd ever been at a school that had an unacceptable campus at the time.
Okay. So you had a lot of challenges that make you.
We had a lot of challenges. We had the community. Really didn't. They were. What do you mean we're unacceptable? By whose standard are we unacceptable?
Exactly.
They were very frustrated with the state
Exactly.
accountability system. And that was at the time of 4x4. We had to take 4 core subjects every 4 years, and,
Mm-hmm.
and the community did not like that either. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of educators didn't feel that was best either. But
Mm-hmm.
we do what the state mandates us to do. So there was a tough time in our community, and we were trying to make change and do what was best for students. And it was it was a lot of hard work and a lot of frustration. But eventually, from my side, we had 11-to-1 student-teacher ratio at the campus we're unacceptable at.
Wow.
That's kind of hard to justify to the taxpayer. So.
Wow.
But through a lot of training, and that was probably where, for myself, from the business side, to where I really became intrigued
Mm-hmm.
by the instructional consultants,
Okay.
and I really realized how similar the expectation and the maximization of resources, and the training what goes on, how very similar that is to the business office. Whereas a lot of people feel those are like two separate ends of the world,
Correct.
opposite buildings, and they barely want to talk to each other. And there's so much more in common. So that was that was a great opportunity. That's why I said I wasn't there long, but I did learn a tremendous amount.
Okay.
And then I got a call from one of the headhunters, service center guy that said, "Hey, I know a district that really needs a good business manager, and they need someone like yourself." And I was hired at Goose Creek. So that was back in 2007. So we moved from Sealy to Baytown, and I was the CFO there for 6 years.
Okay.
Did a lot of things where I really, and kind of that was kind of where everything kind of came together.
Okay.
That was where I really.
Because Goose Creek is a relatively big district. How many students do they have?
Yeah, Goose Creek at the time I got there had about 22,000 students.
Okay, so that's pretty.
And and as of right now, I work at Deer Park, but I was a CFO at Goose Creek for 6 years, and now I'm the board president at Goose Creek, CISD.
Wow.
So I'm still very involved in Goose Creek.
Exactly.
That's where I still live.
But from the career perspective, it was a really important job for you because
It was.
Managing that many students helped you.
Yeah, I went from a district with 20 Sealy, probably a little over 2,000 students, to a district with 22,000, 10 times larger.
It's a big difference.
And so from day one, I had to prove myself because I think a lot of people were saying, "Oh, we got this guy from a small school.
All right.
Does he really know? Can he?" And I go, "You don't understand. When you're in a small school, you do everything.
Correct.
So you know how everything works
You
together.
had too many hats.
And when you go to a bigger school, sometimes the bigger schools, just the way things are set up, and everybody's in their own little silo, and sometimes they don't see how everything ties together.
Correct.
So a funny story is the first time in executive council, when someone from the instruction side made a comment about taking a class, a career tech class. "Hey, we're going to move it down to 8th grade, and we're going to do this." And I said, "Well, if you do that, it's going to cost you $1 million." The room kind of fell silent. What is the business manager talking about when we're talking about instruction?
Exactly.
I'm like, everything we do ties back to how much money we have, one way or another. So that was where.
That is fascinating.
So now Goose Creek was kind of where all my experience from all my other districts, and I've always been intrigued by PEIMS. Because when you're the CFO, you do the template. Well, you do the template, you just get, and PEIMS, is the Public Education Information Management System.
Yeah, and that's what I wanna let you finish about your career, and then we're gonna talk about these concepts because I want the audience to, administrators who are watching us right now, principals and superintendents who may not be that familiar with school finance.
Okay.
Talking about those concepts. But you were in Goose Creek, and after that.
Yeah, it was Goose Creek 6 years. Did well, built the fund balance. I left there in 2013, had an opportunity to come across the channel. The individual who was the CFO at Deer Park was retiring. So I took that opportunity and came here, and that was in 2013. And so I've been here about 5 years, going on my 5th year.
Okay.
And they were looking for someone who had Deer Park, like Goose Creek, very industrial-based tax base. So they wanted someone who was familiar with that.
And Deer Park, how many students do we have in
Deer Park has about 13,000 students.
Okay.
A little over 2,000 of those live outside of our district and transfer in. We have an open enrollment program.
Okay.
And we also allow our students that live in our district to do inter-district transfers. So.
But one of the things that you left out in your narrative, and I think you're really humble about it, is that not only you're a board president, a board member, you're actively involved in volunteering work. You don't get any payment by being a board member. And the second thing is that you started your doctorate in the University of Houston Clear Lake, which is really remarkable because it tells us that you're also really interested in the instructional part of the educational business.
I am. And I wasn't that way when I first got into this business. I was like, hey, I crunch numbers.
Exactly.
That was kind of what I did and enjoyed it and loved it. And then as I got better at it, and as I was around educators more and felt more comfortable in talking about instructional issues and things of that nature, I kind of got the idea, maybe I could be a superintendent one day. And I kind of, it sat with me for a while. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt I could be. And there were a few in the state who had made the jump from CFO to that side to be a superintendent and have been very successful. So I said, well, what do I need to do to become a superintendent? Well, first thing, I need to get certified. I said, since I don't have the instructional background that most candidates will have, I felt it was important that I went and got a doctorate degree. So I'm working on that. I'm working on my dissertation right now. And then another thing I did was I went and gave testimony at State Board of Education and the State Board of Education's, or SBEC, State Board of Educators Certification. And I gave testimony to allow them, because up until that point, if you weren't from the instructional background, you didn't have a principalship certification, you couldn't be a superintendent certificate. You could only be like a 3-year waiver.
Exactly.
And so they actually, and I'm not saying they changed it just because of me, but I did.
But you contributed.
I contributed, and I was
discussion.
very in the process, and I was very involved. And they changed that rule that now they allow individuals with 3 years of management experience at a upper district level to be substituted for the principal certification, so you can take the superintendent test.
That is fantastic. Before I ask you a question in regards to the gaps between instruction and school finance as a concept, I want you to clarify 2 concepts for the audience in simple terms, please.
Okay.
Number 1 would be what you're talking about, the PIMS.
Okay.
PIMS, which in the state of Texas has a particular meaning, and probably for other states may have similar systems.
Yeah.
But let's start with PIMS. What is
Okay.
PIMS?
So PIMS, the acronym stands for Public Education Information Management System. So what it is, every student who comes to your district, when they register, usually the registrar goes in and looks, are they identified as a GT student? Are they identified, are they taking a career and tech course if they're at the high school level? Are they receiving special education services?
Or the gifted and talented,
Gifted
or
and
their
talented,
special
bilingual
education.
ESL, all these things, they get extra weights. Because research shows, or the state funding says, if they fall into these categories, or then there's another 13 criteria if they're at risk. You have to use compensatory ed funds on those students to help with those services. So the research has shown that students that meet those criteria, they cost a little bit more to educate. And so you may have 2 schools with 10,000 students.
So basically, the concept is that those students get labeled in a management data system,
Yes.
so to say, and then the state provides extra funds for those different weights based on the cost that may take to district to educate those individuals based on their particular needs.
Yeah, you may have 2 schools with 10,000 students. You get paid on a WADA, weighted average daily attendance. So you may have 10,000 students, and this school has 12,000 WADA. Well, this school is very low socioeconomic. They have other, high special ed students or whatever. And so they may have the same number of students, but they may have 14,000 WADA.
Correct.
Because of their weights, and they should need more money to help educate those students to get to the same level.
Correct.
In theory.
Now, the interesting part is that the PIM system, the database system, is it collects data from students on any area, right?
Yes.
Like not only socioeconomic, not only academic, but also testing. Academic. So it's a big area. Now let's talk about fund balance. Now, first of all, what is fund balance? And a lot of people ask about fund balance and why at this, because I want you to first of all define it, but then talk about the restriction from the state. At least in Texas, it seems that they're required to have at least 3 months of operations.
Yes.
So I want you to explain why is that necessary. People say, okay, because it's a contingency, because the district may shut down, and then how can that happen in nowadays? And so I want you to talk about that. What is fund balance, and what is the restriction?
Well, fund balance simply is the accumulation of the monies, of revenues over expenditures over each year.
Okay.
And so basically, for a home, like someone, like an individual, use their savings account.
Their savings account. Okay.
It's not always necessarily 100% cash, but it's, the fund balance is just the difference between revenue and expenditures accumulated. TEA, the Texas Education Agency, has a rule, preference. They want you to have at least 3 months of operating expenditures, or basically 25% of your operating budget.
Why do you think the state asked for that? What's your rationale behind it?
I think it's best practice. I think, it's like anything. You don't want, I mean, we just went through Harvey here in Houston.
Okay.
We had Ike, 8, 9, 10 years, 9 years ago. Things happen, just like in life. Things happen. So you want to have money set aside so that when those events happen, you may not get insurance from Harvey for, it could take you 1, 2, 3 years. You got to get kids in school within 12 days, because that's when you get about 9 days of waiver this last session. You had to get schools open. So if you have that money there, you can do that. When the insurance money comes in, you pay yourself off, or you reimburse yourself. If you have something new that comes up, all of a sudden you want to do a different kind of program, and there's $1 million startup or whatever, you need to have that money's available. So you definitely want to have 3 months. The state comes in, if you're doing a bond, they come in and the state, or the permanent school fund will guarantee, get you a highest rating because they guarantee the schools. So TEA wants you to have, they're also invested to make sure that the schools have enough to operate and handle the emergencies that come up.
Exactly. Now, I want to go in deep water. First of all, by doing your doctorate and working in finance, what are the biggest gaps that you see in terms of instruction and operations? Because sometimes, like you mentioned, I feel that there's a great divide in there. Like you feel that there's some people working in an area. Once you start doing your doctorate, once you start getting into the instructional part, you became an instructional leader. What are the commonalities and the difference that you see between them? And why do you think that people diminish the importance of school finance in schools?
Well, it was interesting. First of all, I got to give props out to cohort 9. Okay, that was the best cohort ever. Okay, and I was the only one in cohort 9. Not from an instructional background.
Okay.
I mean, not from, or the only one on the money side. So it was a great opportunity to when you do projects and you see other people's presentations, to learn about such things as how you handle discipline and behavior, and how you implement programs. So on the instruction side, so it was terrific. Had great conversations, great dialogue, and I really learned a lot. And even occasionally, I think I was able to contribute to something.
Exactly. And also, your wife is an educator,
yeah,
so you
my
have
wife,
that opportunity, that background there to help you.
Yeah, my wife was a teacher for 9 years. Not able to teach anymore due to some medical reasons, but
I guess at home
I've always been able to ask her instructional questions.
Exactly.
and to learn and pick her brain. And I pick her brain a lot more about instruction than she does about school finance and mine, but it's great. It's great. So, to the question of having both, the finance, what I've learned is...
Why do you think that there's such a great divide in so many cases? And how to close that gap?
Well, yeah. Well, the first thing, why is there that divide? I think there's that divide because, the business office, we typically look at things numerically.
Exactly.
Or quantitatively, is the doctorate program word.
Exactly.
And then on the instruction side, they do a great job, but they look at things more qualitatively at times.
Correct.
And so I think you get both sides, and it's probably a little more on the business side at times.
Yeah.
They're quick to say, a little chip on the shoulder per se is, well, all they think about is this. They don't understand numbers.
Exactly.
And then the other side says, well, they don't understand about student achievement. They just think of numbers.
Exactly.
And so really what I see that gap is, and over time that gap can get wider and wider and wider, and that's not healthy. That's not healthy. So it's just like anything we do in education and instruction is, there needs to have that formal piece where everybody can be at the same table, whether it's at an executive council, at the superintendent level, or at whatever level it may be, to where the numbers person, if you want to call them that, and the instruction side, where they get to understand one another. So I've given many presentations, at service centers and to individuals really not in the business office, more career and tech education directors and principals and administrators, because I have it's taken me a while, but I have I understand what all goes into that process.
Yeah.
It's not just decisions shouldn't just be monetary, but it shouldn't just be all students either.
Correct.
There has to be that conversation from both sides, and both sides have to go in thinking and understanding at the end of the day, we want to do what's best for students. And sometimes doing what's best for students sometimes is doing it the most efficient way, so that you don't spend a lot of more money than you need to, which gives you other monies to do in other areas.
Correct. And I think that leads me to the follow-up question, which should be, in your experience, what are the biggest and more common mistakes that new school district leaders or school officials make when getting to a new positions and in terms of school finance? Let's say that you're a brand new superintendent, that your background is not school finance. What would you recommend for them to do to avoid making a lot of common mistakes? So I remember you and I having a conversation. Many of our conversations, you talk about, one of the things you talk about is reviewing, making sure that each student is coded correctly, because like you said, state and federal government give you extra funds based on the right coding. So having systems in place that make sure the schools with the secretaries and they code the students correctly, and then it goes back to the central office. But beyond that, what are the things that you would recommend new school officials getting in positions and having to lead districts and not having a school finance background? I mean, it's to avoid making the most common mistakes.
Well, I think as a superintendent, I've always been told, as a superintendent, you have two very important hires. If you want to include the athletic director, we'll go with three. But two, and number one is your high school principal.
Exactly.
And the second one is your business manager or your
Exactly.
CFO. Those are, those two can get you in more trouble than any other hire. And so I think the first key is to understand and realize that's not your area of expertise.
Correct.
And so either make sure you have a really good business manager, or make sure you have a good network of people that you trust that can help you with doing the template or looking at some things. I help a lot of superintendents, in smaller schools. That's their first time being a superintendent. And they look at the summary of finance template and they're like, I have no idea. And here, this is my world.
Correct.
I will, help you through it, and I will help you explain it. And usually after 2 or 3 years, they don't need me anymore, because I want them to understand it. It makes them a better superintendent. Just like me learning the instruction side, I think makes me a better CFO.
Correct.
So that's kind of my thought. That's kind of how I view that. It's important to know what you know and realize what you don't know.
Correct.
And then go out, and ask and do research. Talk to other superintendents. The superintendents have meetings. Get with your CFO, whether it's 1-to-1 or whatever, and say, hey, when I interview with the board, I told them we're going to do this, this, and this. How do we afford to do this, this, and this? And let's you and I come up with a plan. And it all goes into, everybody wants to have a strategic plan, a long-range facilities plan. But one thing that kind of gets left out is the business plan. You have to fund the strategic plan. You have to fund the long-range facility plan, whether it's bonds or non-bonds, but you have to have the business plan.
Correct.
So it's, we talk about the board, 7 members on a board, and the superintendent being a team of 8. The administrative team needs to be a team as well.
Yeah.
And everybody has a role, and nobody's role is more important than the other. But at the end, you're going to make decisions that are going to affect a community.
Yeah.
And if you spend more money, you come in and doing great programs, and all of a sudden at the end of the year, you don't have any money left, or you just lost $3 million out of a $5 million fund balance.
All right.
No one remembers the programs you put in. They remember you ran it bankrupt.
It's important because these get evaluated in the academics and the finance part.
They do.
I mean, they basically, in most of the states are like that. They have like some indexes that they get evaluated in both. So, but I want to go deeper in what you're saying. What would be the questions that, the most common question that a superintendent should ask? Let's say a superintendent had no idea about school finance or no many. One of the things that you talk about, fund balance, for example, like any household account, you should reconcile those accounts, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that you really have that money there. So what about, for example, asking the CFO or the business manager, have these accounts recently been reconciled to really know what the amount of fund balance you have at the end.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they can tell you you have $3-5 million fund balance, but those accounts haven't reconciled in 6 months.
6 months ago we did.
Exactly. And
Yeah, if you're a new superintendent, one of the first calls I think you should make is to the district's auditor.
okay.
And just say, hey, I'm getting ready to take this job, or I just took this job, however it is. Say, what can you tell me about when you audit? I mean, is everything reconciled? Do we have does the business office give you everything that you need? And have you ever had any issues?
All right.
The auditor is independent; they can give you that information. Then the other side, you talk to the business manager or the CFO or assistant superintendent of business, whatever title there is, and you say, I mean, in my current role, I give the board, they get reports every month, and by the time that report goes out, it's reconciled. It's usually, if we have a January meeting, it's usually as of November 30th. I mean, it's it's a month and a half behind usually. So and we reconcile. We call it proof of cash. I mean, the money's there.
And do the state have like some expectation in terms of those reconciliation? I mean, do they have like deadlines that this district have to reconcile, or that's something more inside the district?
It's more inside the district.
Okay.
I'm going back a few years. A couple of, back in the day. This is old school, but
Yeah.
back in the day, especially in your smaller schools, the business manager just kind of put everything in a box. The auditor would come and pick it up and take it back.
Exactly.
And they would have to maybe do some reconciliations. And he said, well, then Sarbanes-Oxley came out when when WorldCom and Enron and all that stuff came out. Some laws changed.
Yeah.
So now you can't have an auditor audit their own work.
Exactly.
So they can't reconcile it for you anymore.
Exactly.
And so, I know our audit firm comes out in the middle of the year, or just past the middle of the year, and they'll do 6, 7, 8 months. So we have to, we have it reconciled, and we expect it to be done. They expect it to be done, because I don't want to give somebody some information on 9-month-old. I mean, a lot of things can happen in 9 months, and I want it reconciled.
But what about the right coding though for students, which is critical for your funding? What system do you recommend to put in place to make sure that you have the right coding for students? I mean, besides having a really close relation with the CNI department.
I get reports, every 6 weeks. Every time we do a PEIMS submission to the state, a couple weeks before they're due, I get reports from the PEIMS coordinator, and those reports go throughout the district. And if my PEIMS coordinators were here, she would tell you, Pete looks at every report.
Exactly.
And I ask questions, and because to me at that point it's data.
What are the things that you look when you look at the stuff? Just as an example.
I mean, I look. I know what our enrollment is. I get an enrollment report every week, and so if our ADA is way off of that, I say, hey, is it a campus not get included, or something wrong because we're missing numbers? It doesn't look right. I typically our enrollment, 95, 96% attendance. That should be your ADA, give or take.
Correct.
If it's way off than that, I look the
And
flags.
how those mistakes happen? Like somebody forget to include those at school in the numbers, or
sometimes it will. Oh, I ran it. I just somebody hadn't. It wasn't. They didn't click the campus hadn't clicked it as complete yet, or something like that. It's just each system's a little different.
Okay.
So I look for that information. I look for I work with my child nutrition department to make sure that we
which
get
is the economically disadvantaged.
because those students that qualify for free and reduced, that number directly determines your comp ed numbers.
Correct.
But also that comp ed number determines is one of the factors in WADA, one of the special programs. So if I was actually just a quick story. I was doing my template the other day, and I was going down entering all my stuff, and I got to the number of free and reduced students, and I skipped it because I'll get that in a minute. And I went through and I forgot I had skipped it.
Yeah.
And I ran the number, and I was like, oh, whoa, it's this, whoa, we are in trouble. And I was like, oh my gosh, back to the beginning. And I was like, oh, I forgot that number. When I put that number, it changed everything. So, I look at last 3 years. I look at trends.
So you look at trends to see, if, for example, if career and tech have gone down drastically, or lab students, or
Yeah, I look like career and tech. When we had, House Bill 5 came into effect about 5 years ago. Well, I knew when House Bill 5 came in, but I knew within 2 to 3 years later, career and tech should start going up because kids have more electives.
Correct.
And more electives you take, not all those electives, but some of them are going to be career and tech courses.
Okay.
So I look at that.
And the state provide funding for those.
Yes, you get funded extra for career and tech.
Exactly.
Receives a 1.35 weight,
Exactly.
which is
What happened when a district for example, made a mistake in the, and actually, before I ask you that, let me ask you a more general question. What are the more common mistakes that superintendents make, or district officials make in regards to school finance? Where do they get in trouble most of the time?
Typically, where they get in trouble is just not understanding the template. Now, the template, there's two columns in the template. One is called LPE, which is a legislative payment estimate, which is really just the legislative budget board's budget for that school. That's what they're going to pay you. They're going to give you that money, what's on that column, no matter what.
Whatever you put in there, they're going to pay you that.
Well, it's whatever the state determines. They base it off last year's data.
Okay, the last year's data. Okay.
Now, the districts do go in every couple of years and give them enrollment estimates.
Okay.
And I'm sure they use that information as well.
Okay.
And so that's the cash flow you're going to get. You're going to get that cash. The biggest mistake some people make, or mistakes that happen, is they spend that.
Explain that. Why?
So let's say the state says, you know what, we think you're going to have 10,000 students next year and all that stuff, so they're going to pay you this, and you spend it.
They're going to give you,
Well, the whole year,
they're going to give you $100 million.
Yeah, they're going to give you $100 million, or whatever 9,000 students get you. Well, the whole 10,000 students get you. Well, the whole year, you only have 9,100 students.
Okay.
You know that. I know that every time I get it.
So the enrollment that
spend it.
year was
Yeah.
significantly lower than
Yeah.
when the state, when the state told you it's going to
Yeah.
give you.
And so you spend all that money based on you were going to give it 10,000. Well, at the end of the year, you submit your PEMS in June, and then you submit your tax information at the end of August. All that goes into the state formulas, and they say, oh, we overpaid you. Well, now you're like, it's almost like double whammy. A, I owe it back to the state, and B, I've already got it, and most of it's in salaries. So what do I do for the next year? Then the red flags go up, and everybody's stressed.
Yeah.
It's not good.
And the worst part is that when they show that they overpay you have to give that money back almost immediately, right?
Yeah, they usually
How much do they give you usually to give that money back?
Back in the day, they used to do what? Well, you don't have to cut us a check. We'll just reduce your next year's funding.
Wow.
Well, there are a few stories of whether I don't know if it was intentional or not. But you may have a superintendent who's there 2 or 3 years, and then they leave. Then the new guy comes in and we have no money.
Exactly.
And no one knew about it.
Wow.
And that happens very, very rare, but it does.
Yeah.
Happen.
Wow.
Or it has happened.
Now, is that myth of the budget being 80%, 80 to 85% a reality, or is that a myth? In terms of personnel.
My current budget this year is 84% is personnel. 84%.
What is the lowest that you have ever had it?
Maybe 78, 79,
Okay.
but it's never been below 70.
So it's around 80% regardless.
Typically 80%,
Yeah.
plus or minus 2, and you're going to
Exactly.
get 99% of all the school districts.
Okay.
We're a service organization, and
Yeah.
to provide service takes people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, to close it up, Pete, can you give any recommendation to future educators, principals, looking to go higher in their careers and eventually have responsibility over school finance? What would you, not having a school finance background, what would you recommend them to do as initial steps to not get in trouble and actually being successful?
Well, depending on your district, I know at Deer Park, the district I work at, we have a leadership academy. So if you're a teacher and you're someone who wants to aspire to be an administrator, I strongly encourage you to take if your district offers some kind of a leadership academy, because one of those sessions is going to be school finance, and that's one of the few chances I get one-on-one with principals and APs and teachers that are aspiring administrators, and I tell them, we go over the account code structure, and I say, there's actually a rhyme and reason to this. I don't stay up at night making this stuff up. Okay, this is what it's for. So just have a general understanding. You don't have to be an expert, but just gain a general understanding. The next thing I tell them is, if you have a general understanding of school finance, and it's important to look, contact your business manager. If you're a new superintendent or a new principal or a new AP, even if you're an AP, call and ask, say, hey, do you have 15, 20? Most of them would be, we'll make room for you. We'd love to have you come in. And just walk me through if I were to be a principal, what should I be looking for?
Right.
I mean, because every district's different. I know my district, each principal gets X number of dollars per student. That's in their campus, and it's their money to sit down with their site-based committee and determine what is best for that campus and their students. But sometimes they're not real familiar. You know, a year ago they may have been a teacher, and now all of a sudden they're helping.
They had to
with
manage
the
a
budget.
school of 600 students.
And so, don't ever be afraid to ask. And then on the other side of the coin, I'll tell business managers, don't be afraid to offer training services for new super. You know, we go out. Sorry, not new principals. You know, and here, whenever we hire a new principal, you know, someone from our business office, the director or myself or somebody at that level, we'll make an arrangement with them, and we will teach them how to look into the accounting system, how to run reports. This is how you run reports, so you know how much money you have in your budget. This was, you know, oftentimes they come in the summer sometimes. We say, okay, this was the budget that was submitted. You may want to look at it. You may have different priorities, and let us know, and we'll move that money around for you up front, you know, before you
That's
start.
a great system.
And we do the training.
And you do that with departments too, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
the head of the
Anytime
department.
you get a
had
new
to-
department.
Yeah.
We do training with the campus secretary, whoever is taking cash in from student fees, whoever is taking field trip
Yeah,
monies.
because the other thing that we didn't talk about it, and I would like you to mention real quick before we finish is the issue with vendors.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people get in trouble for not following the procedures, and
Yes.
sometimes the business office get a really bad rapport because they say that they're really bureaucratic and they're paying, but the reality they're protecting
Yeah.
people for not getting in trouble.
Yeah, by law, you can't use a vendor who's not on your vendor list.
Correct.
That's pretty important law. Now, I've worked with a lot of individuals in purchasing, and the key that I've always strive for, and we have a great purchasing director here, is we try not to tell somebody no. We tell them we can't do it this way. However, this is a way we can do it, and it's legal, and it will get you what you want.
All right.
And we say, if this is a vendor you're going to use again in the future, you think you're going to use them quite often, this is the information you need to send to them so they can get on the vendor list.
All right.
Or get on a purchasing cooperative, or whatever the depending on how much you spend, depending on what it is. But we always, our goal is to always not be just the no department.
Right.
We want to be the department that says, I see what you're trying to do. The way you're wanting to do it is either not legal or not allowed. However, let me help you find a way where we can do it to where you get what you want and we're within the constraints of the law.
Working cooperative. Well, I want to thank you one more time, Peter.
Thank you.
Pape, for being here with us today. Our audience, remember that we have this video and many others on Antonio Corrales' YouTube channel. It's StarlingEvaluationAssessment.com, and we also have it in podcast. Okay, thank you so much for being with us today, and see you next time.
Thank you.